evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, October 16th, 7:01 p.m. and we are in regular business session tonight. And before we go into the regular business meeting, we're going to have a public hearing. And the purpose of this is to see if there are comments from our audience members about the planned unit development titled Homestead Court and Broadmoor at University Estates. A little bit of background information. This has been in the planning stages for several years. It does have what's called tax incremental financing, a TIF, effective for this development. It did come before the Planning Commission and was recommended by the Planning Commission on September 7th, 2023, that it be approved. It recommended to recommend to City Council approval of this planned unit development submitted by Patrick Lawson and Cornerstone. At the time that it came before both the Planning Commission in September and then our City Council on September 11th at our Planning and Development Committee, the difficulty with the situation was that the developer had found out from the engineer that prices had increased, doubled, I believe is what the approximate number was. And so at that point, he was not going to be able to proceed with the development. The recommendation of the city administration is that we did air and discussed it that night in committee, and then the recommendation from city is that that we consider moving forward. This public hearing is the next step in that. We have not moved any legislation forward at this point. But the hope is that the developer will find a source of funding, and then if that's the case, we will have proceeded with the public hearing and we would be ready to start legislation. It's what our service safety director would call a shovel-ready project. And that has often happened with our city projects where we have something ready, federal funds like the ARPA or the recovery funds were available, and we had projects that were ready to go. So that's the rationale behind the recommendation for this. So our purpose tonight, we've asked everybody to sign in, and then our purpose tonight is to see if there is anybody from the audience who wants to make a comment about this planned unit development. It is located over at in the University Estates area, and would provide affordable housing, some more affordable housing possibilities for us in the community. No comments, okay. Mayor Patterson.
If I may add to your comments, and I really appreciate how you really spoke to what needed to be heard in terms of how long this project has been underway. It was 2018 when this project started. The hope is that there is a new state program through OFA, the Ohio Housing Financing Agency, and it's a program called the Single Family Home Tax Credit for new single family homes. So we're hopeful that something like this would fit with a shovel-ready project. To our understanding, nobody has applied yet, largely because they're just either today or sometime this week, they're going to release what the guidelines, the full guidelines are for this particular program. But we suspect that this would actually fit within that program. But again, it's, no pun intended, it's not shutting the door on this potential project. It's just doing what I believe we should be doing to assist if this works with Cornerstone to be able to develop these homes. I should also say to council that with approving something like this, if we move forward, and if it does not work at all, any other developer, it's not like, okay, this is already planned and this is what we're going to do. The whole process would have to be gone through again with somebody else if this doesn't work at the end of the day.
So that's clearly the advantage if they were able to find a source of funding. Okay. All right. Yes, Mr. Dulac. Name, address, and if you're representing a group.
So Rob Dulac, live on Morris Avenue here in the city of Athens. I just want to speak in support of the council's effort to take this project forward and even go through the approval process, if that makes sense. I sat through the planning commission meetings, so I don't think anyone else on council even did that. And so I was privy to all the discussions and really saw what this project was like. And I think it's critical to providing additional housing here in Athens. It was a 47 units, I think, was a good sized project, big enough to help. And it's disappointing to see that it right now is at least stalled, hopefully not done. But I think this is exactly what we need to be doing here, and it's good to see council moving forward with this. I'd like to commend you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Is there anybody else wanting to make a comment tonight? Councilmember Spielness.
Yes. So I do want to add to what Rob said. I know personally people who were about to or did put money down when they thought the project was going forward, and they're absolutely so eager to find housing like this. We really need it. It's a segment of the type of housing that people who want to age in place or have a disability, or young professionals who are looking for their first place. We really need this kind of housing, so I absolutely support this going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Swank.
Just one question, and apologize for not having it here in front of me, but when the original ordinance was passed by previous council, one of the stipulations was that the building plans for the development would be approved by the Affordable Housing Commission and I believe the Disabilities Commission before it advanced. If we're going to be asked to vote on this year, when might those two approvals be made?
We don't have the answers for that tonight, but we can get those. That's a good question. Thank you for asking it.
Okay.
Is there anybody else from the audience that has a comment tonight before we close the public hearing? Thank you so much. We'll consider it closed at 7:08 p.m. We'll now move forward and establish our quorum for council. All but one of our council members is here tonight, 6 of our 7. And we'll now move on to disposition of minutes for the regular session held October 2nd, 2023. I could have a motion for their approval.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll consider them approved. We now have communications. Do council members have any communications tonight? Okay. We'll move on to reports and communications from other elected officials. Our law director's office, represented by Ms. Branner Hiddle tonight.
Yep. Thank you. No report.
Okay, thank you. Auditor Hecht? No report. Mayor Patterson?
President Isley, really the only thing I have to share with council this evening is that we received a really nice, basically a proclamation from the auditor of the state of Ohio, Keith Farber's office, in recognition of our efforts and successes in getting the funding for the Athens Armory. It was given to me earlier today at a really nice celebration or event to a groundbreaking for the Armory project as we move forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we're ready for ordinances for third reading, and we only have one of those tonight. Moving it forward for a vote. This is 9423, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a memorandum of understanding and addendum with the Ohio Organized Crime Investigations Commission. This is task force number 2209. And this was originally introduced by Councilmember McCary, and Councilmember Grace will be reporting on this tonight.
Thank you, President Isley. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt ordinance 9423.
Second.
Thank you, Member Crowell. And this ordinance is very short, but section 1 states that the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a memorandum of understanding and addendum with the Ohio Organized Crime Investigation Commission Task Force number 2209, a copy of which is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. And this is the type of agreement that the city makes on a fairly regular basis. And this is one that was requested, I believe, by our chief of police. He thought that this would be a valuable organization to cooperate with. And it will, it includes counties of Athens, Morgan, Noble, Monroe, Meigs, and Washington. So it's a Southeast Ohio specific task force.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and second for approval. Do we have any comments or questions from council members? Other elected officials, administration, or our audience members? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We now have ordinances for second reading. This is one of the 3 readings required by Ohio law. I'll be reading the titles of them, pausing briefly to see if there are questions or comments, or if there's a need to suspend any of the ordinances tonight, and then we'll move through those. 107 doesn't need, yeah, I thought I marked that. Okay, thank you. Good. The first one is 9623. This is an ordinance amending ordinance 1123, authorizing construction of the new fire headquarters, and this is project number 346 and is introduced by Councilmember McCary. If no comments or questions from anyone, we will move on to ordinance 9723. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Zoning Code, Title 23, Chapter 23.03. General Regulations and Permitted Modifications, Section 23.03.13L1A, Sign Regulations, introduced by Councilmember Grace. If no questions or comments, we'll move on to the next ordinance, and that's 9823. This is an ordinance authorizing the sale of property no longer needed for a municipal purpose and is introduced by Councilmember Grace. Are there any comments or questions from anyone? Okay. The next one is 123, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title I, General Provisions, Chapter 1.03, Code Fees Established, Section 5.04.08, Sewer Rates, and this is introduced by all members of council. Are there any comments or questions? Yes, Councilmember Swank.
At the last regular session of council, we were provided a very detailed graph by the Service Safety Director. And what it showed was our current position relative to a balance or carryover in the sewer fund, and what that balance would look like if 4 scenarios played out between now and the year 2040. One was no increase, one was an annual increase of 1%, one was an annual increase of 2%, and one was an annual increase of 3%. And looking at this chart we discussed last time, it appeared even if we didn't raise the rates at all, we would still have $5 million balance carryover as late as 2008, 5 years from now. And the question was asked, if we did that, could we redraw this graph to see what the implications would be? In other words, when would we be going into a deficit position? And I asked at that time, and in the context of some of the things that might be coming up, but I'm going to ask it again today because of what I discovered last week. And this is something I don't think most people in this town are aware of. Last week, why I don't know, I went on the county auditor's website. It has totally been redone, and it is a wonderful design. But one of the new features of the website is it shows the tax ramifications of issues on the ballot. First of all, real property in Athens has been reappraised from 2022 to 2023. I've been watching this in the Columbus Dispatch. Some areas have seen as much as a 41% increase in property value. I took a random sampling of 12 properties here in Athens. The average change is 20%. Which, if you're building equity in your home, is a good thing. But on the flip side, if there are tax issues on the ballot, which we have 2 this fall, and I would wager most of the money in my pocket, there aren't 3 people that in here could tell me what those two levies are. It's huge. I'll give you an idea, and I'm not going to name names, but this is how this would affect council. One council member would see an increase of $535 in their taxes in a year, another $485, another $228, another $256, and another $263. In view of the fact that if both of these pass, and the 2 issues are the Athens bond issue for a new high school, and the other is a 1.5 mil EMS levy, if these were to pass, this is something any property owner, whether they that owns a property, and renters, because this will be passed on. There's not a landlord in town that could absorb this. We're going to see significant hit on people's budgets. This is on an annual basis. And for that reason, I'm hoping that before we take a vote on this in 2 weeks, we can get this information. People are going to go to the ballot here in 2 weeks. And unless you check the auditor's website, do a search, you'll have no idea what you're voting on, what impact that's going to have on your personal budget. And these are big numbers. These are big, big numbers. So I would be very, very uncomfortable if this was 3rd reading, voting in favor of this in view of the fact we have these additional increases. If the new graph would show we could put off an increase 1, 2, or 3 years. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, thank you for the comments. Okay. If no other comments or questions, we will move on to the next ordinance. 10123, this is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 7, Traffic Code, Chapter 7.05, Parking Regulations, Sections 7.0522 and 7.05.26, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. If no comments or questions, we'll move on to the next. This is ordinance 10223. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 1, General Provisions, Chapter 1.03, Code Fees Established, to include Sections 7.05.22 and 7.05.26, Parking Rates, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Question.
Yes, Councilmember Spielness.
So I was looking over these amounts and thinking about it in more detail, and I thought, what about those folks who are service workers downtown? And I'm concerned about how they manage this kind of increase. I mean, it's expensive enough. I've heard that there are certain store owners, whatever, in town that have programs where they, I don't know, give them some, subsidize their parking or make arrangements for their parking. But this is a lot of money, and for service workers to have absorbed that seems a concern for me. So I'm wondering if there's any way, and maybe it's not included as part of this in some way, but if there's any way we can help the service workers to be able to park and work downtown.
Thank you for the comment. Yep. Councilmember Swank.
If I could, Mr. Ziff, you work at one of the uptown establishments and have done so successfully for some time. From your experience, how do those working in the service industry, whether it be food, beverage, or retail, deal with parking uptown? And in your opinion, how much of a burden is this on them, to follow up on the question that was just previously asked?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Member Swank. So most of us, either we scour the surrounding neighborhoods looking for an unmetered space. I myself do that quite frequently. I end up parking up farther along West Washington, up behind the middle school pretty regularly. A lot of us just keep feeding the meter all day. It definitely hurts. It's very disheartening to look at your paycheck a lot of times, because most of us a lot of us are tipped employees, so we make minimum wage, and then we get paid on top of that. But it's very frustrating always to see, a full hour or sometimes 2 hours of your whole shift being spent on parking. which definitely hurts. I think the best thing would be to make parking completely free, but I recognize that that's not possible anyway. Or to increase the state minimum wage would be amazing. But we're not going to do that to a point that's livable for most of us anytime soon. I think this is going to impact service workers. I think it's going to frustrate people. I think all of us are kind of used to it at this point, realistically. I think none of us are necessarily expecting any bonuses. That being said, a lot of us also work after the hours that you have to pay the meters. So I know a lot of my friends who are bartenders, they'll feed for the first couple hours of their shift, but then they don't have to anymore after 7 o'clock, and then they're there until 3 in the morning when they drive home. Not after consuming alcohol, of course. Obviously goes without saying. Don't want that to sound risque. But yeah, I mean, it hurts every single time. It always does. No way around it.
So with that great answer, and I appreciate that, I would be interested to know, much like this graph, what would be the impact on the city's finances, the city's budget, whatever line item that is, if we didn't raise those rates? How do we find that out?
And I don't know that it's the auditor's office to do that. I think it's, once again, the city administrations perhaps to work with the auditor's office in terms of long-term, the revenue projections for that.
I'm happy to work with them, think about that. But I can't do it right now.
So that said, would it be prudent for us as a council to table it so we could get the whole story before considering a vote?
I'd give us my suggestion, we have 2 weeks between now and the next business meeting, and my initial reaction to this, just process-wise, is that gives us some time perhaps to work for an auditor and administration office, and we can't turn it around on a dime in 24 hours, but 2 weeks' time, we might by the third reading.
That
If you don't
certainly
have
be fair,
sufficient
yes.
answers, then that's council's prerogative to be able to move towards tabling the motion if they don't feel they have sufficient information. It'll go to the mayor, and then I'll come back to Councilmember Spielness.
You know, we can look at this and at least figure out how this is going to work. We did have a healthy conversation, I believe, with first reading, where we did talk about some of the changes that we want to make with a new renovated or new renovation plan for the parking garage. That's going to cost money. We're currently carrying debt on the parking garage from previous renovations, but if we're going to go to a situation where we have a kiosk system, there's cost involved with doing a kiosk. And so that conversation, I thought, was a good conversation. To hear now that the council's thinking about tabling it yet again, just bear in mind, there's things that we will be able to do if this moves forward. There's going to be things that we will not be able to do if this does not move forward. Because debt is debt. And it's a proprietary fund for the parking garage unto itself to be able to self-support any operations as well as any renovations to the parking garage.
Thank you. Councilmember Spielness.
Thank you very much. I realize that this is not a conversation we can really have today or perhaps as part of this, this ordinance. But I would appreciate if perhaps the city administration, along with the Chamber of Commerce perhaps, and the business community to talk about maybe some arrangements for service workers to make it more possible for them to do this and still make enough to get by. So I think we might be able to be creative about it, and I think a conversation would be worth it. Thank you.
And are you willing to approach the chamber then and other groups to see if that's possible?
Sure.
Okay. Just to see if we have some kind of answer within the next 2 weeks. That might also play into the discussion. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? All right, thank you. We'll move on to 10323. This is an ordinance amending the 2023 appropriation ordinance 15522, introduced by Councilmember Crowell. If no questions or comments, we will move on to 10423. This is an ordinance finalizing costs for the Armory project number 313, and authorizing expenditures from the City of Athens to the Athens Community Improvement Corporation Fund, introduced by Councilmember Crowell. If no comments or questions, we'll now move on to 10. Is that one that has to be suspended? That does, okay. This is for the armory expenses, Councilmember Crowell, so I'm thinking that,
So
Yeah,
107
requested.
was the OFCC that was requested. $104, Clerk Walker, or 103?
okay. So you think it's just the 107? I knew that one, yeah, okay. Okay. All right, we'll move, thanks for clarifying. We'll move on to 105-23. And this is an ordinance authorizing funds to the Athens Community Improvement Corporation for payment of 2023 Armory electric bills, authorizing an interfund transfer and requesting reimbursement for payments made by the City of Athens. And this is introduced by Councilmember Crowell. 107-23 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a cultural project cooperative use agreement, the Athens Hall of Honor Veterans Memorial, with the State of Ohio General Assembly for funds granted in House Bill 687 as part of the Armory project, which is project number 313. And this is the one, yes, Councilmember Crowell.
I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules for 107-23 due to the timely nature of the agreement attached.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second for suspending the rules for the reasons given by Councilmember Crowell. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended, Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nysley. I'd like to make a motion to approve 107-23.
Second.
Thank you, Member Ziff. I'll go ahead and read just a few more sections of this ordinance. Whereas the 134th General Assembly of the State of Ohio designated $600,000 to finance a portion of the capital facilities costs associated with the Armory Cultural Project. Section 1, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a cultural project cooperative use agreement, the Athens Hall of Honor Veterans Memorial, with the State of Ohio General Assembly as part of the Armory Project number 313, a copy of which is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. As council members are aware, this next about 15 pages include that cooperative use agreement. This is with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, and specifically targets the cultural aspects of the Armory, and specifically that Athens Hall of Honor Veterans Memorial. Thank you, President Nysley.
Thank you. So we have a motion and second. Do we have any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. 108-23 is an ordinance establishing a special revenue policy for the City of Athens and is introduced by Councilmember Crowell. If no questions or comments, we will now move on to our ordinances for first reading. 109-23 is an ordinance accepting a permanent sanitary utility easement from Erie Land Company, LLC, for the Tyler Park Lift Station and is introduced by Councilmember McCary. And just a point of clarification on this, that I believe that Tyler Park is also what's now known as Kershaw Green. We were a little bit unsure last week when the easement was presented, so just that clarification. And Councilmember Grace will be speaking to this for Councilmember McCary tonight.
Thank you, President Nysley. And yeah, Member McCary discussed this last week in committee, and it is a pretty straightforward utility easement grant from Erie Land Company, LLC, for the purpose of building, accessing, and maintaining the Tyler Park Lift Station and related equipment, and the right to maintain, repair, and/or replace as needed the lift station, utility lines, and related equipment in the easement area for a total consideration of $1. And there are attachments that clearly to individuals who are familiar with the map designations describe the location of this easement. But it is a 0.15668 acre sanitary utility easement, and the necessary for the city to be able to maintain this lift station.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, we'll move on to 11023. This is an ordinance authorizing disposal of equipment and vehicles no longer needed for a municipal purpose, and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me to read the pertinent sections. Section 1, Athens City Council hereby declares the following equipment and vehicles no longer needed for a municipal purpose. Equipment, fire department smoke trailer, vehicles, code office, a 2021 Ford Ranger, and a city bus number 1601. Section 2, the above listed equipment and vehicles are hereby authorized for disposal by donation to other governmental agencies, auctions, sealed bids, trade-in, sell for scrap, or by enterprise wholesale auctions or other enterprise outlets.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to ordinance 11123. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 17, Municipal Income Tax, Chapter 17.01 in general, introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Isley. I'll go ahead and read Section 1. Athens City Council hereby amends Athens City Code, Title 17, Municipal Income Tax, Chapter 17.01 in general, a copy of which is attached here too and incorporated herein by reference. As discussed at Finance and Personnel Committee, and additional information we received from the Auditor's Office, Council will see the following documents. I am not going to read through all of this recommended language, but I am going to highlight a few things here, including the sort of statement of the history here. 17.01.014C, this is the additional language. Important amendments to Section 718 of the Ohio Revised Code were enacted by House Bill 33, passed by the 135th General Assembly and signed by Governor DeWine on July 3rd, 2023. And House Bill 33 required municipal corporations to conform to and adopt the amended provisions of Section 718 of the Ohio Revised Code in order to have the authority to impose, enforce, administer, and collect a municipal income tax. So that is the reason why we are making changes to our code. Section D, as mandated by House Bill 33, Municipal Income Tax Ordinance 111-23, effective January 1st, 2024, comprehensively establishes Title 17 in accordance with the provisions of Section 718 of the Ohio Revised Code to allow the City of Athens to continue the income tax and withholding tax administration and collection efforts on behalf of the City of Athens. The effective date is January 1st, 2024, contains corresponding changes to Section 718 of the Ohio Revised Code. All provisions of this Chapter 17.01 apply to taxable years beginning 2016 and succeeding taxable years. Then we have quite a few sort of definitions and sort of expanding upon definitions such as qualifying remote work location, reporting location, qualifying reporting location, etc. And I will not go into the weeds here. But I did want to note that they're in 17.01.094, extension of time to file. The language will now read that the extended due date of the municipal income tax return for a taxpayer that is an individual shall be the 15th day of the 10th month after the last day of the taxable year to which the return relates. For tax years, this is new language, for tax years ending on or after January 1st, 2023, the extended due date of the City of Athens income tax return for a taxpayer that is not an individual shall be the 15th day of the 11th month after the last day of the taxable year to which the return relates. Got that? Repeat that after me.
Where's mud?
And then finally, section 17.01.10, penalty, interest, fees, and changes. Additional language in paragraph 4. A, for tax years ending on or before December 31st, 2022, Athens may impose a monthly penalty of $25 for each failure to timely file each return. Now, we've added, again from the Ohio Revised Code, section B, for tax years ending on or after January 1st, 2023, with respect to returns other than estimated income tax returns, the City of Athens may impose a penalty not exceeding $25 for each failure to timely file each return, regardless of the liability shown thereon, except that the City of Athens shall abate or refund the penalty assessed on a taxpayer's first failure to timely file a return after the taxpayer files that return. Thank you, President Nisley.
Thank you. All right. If no questions or comments, we will move on to Ordinance 11223. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 3, Administrative Provisions, Chapter 3.03, Executive, Other Officials, Sections 3.03.07, Deputy Auditor, introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nisley. This is a rather simple addition to our code. As discussed at committee, I'll go ahead and read Section 1. In accordance with the Ohio Revised Code 733.19, Athens City Code, Title 3, Administrative Provisions, Chapter 3.03, Executive, Other Officials, Section 3.03.07 is hereby amended to add the following. And under the section of Deputy Auditor, 3.03.07, we are adding paragraph D. This is new language. In the absence or disability of the auditor, the Deputy Auditor shall perform the duties of the auditor. Thank you, President Nisley.
Okay, thank you. If no questions or comments, we will move on to 11323. This is an ordinance amending the 2023 Appropriation Ordinance 15522, introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nisley. As discussed at committee, I'll go ahead and read Section 1. The 2023 Appropriation Ordinance 155-22 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums. $14,843.33 to the General Fund Fire for a Bureau of Workmen's Compensation grant, and $45,000 to the General Fund Parking Enforcement for credit card fees, and $20,000 for maintenance contract, and increasing the total appropriations by the same amounts. Thank you, President Nisley.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to 11423. This is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 29, Housing Regulations, Chapter 29.03, Rental Dwelling, Short-Term Rental, and Housing Permit, Section 29.03.08, Fees, introduced by Councilmember Crowell.
Thank you, President Nisley. The amendment to this ordinance is simply to move the fee into a separate part of the code. So paragraph C under fees in this section reads, said rental permit shall be reinstated upon payment of all past due amounts plus interest, along with a reinstatement fee of $100 per unit. We are striking out of $100 per unit and simply including established by separate ordinance. Thank you, President Nisley.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Swank.
I don't have any rental property, so I don't know how the rental permit process works, so somebody's going to need to help me with this. Let's say I buy a property and I decide to make it a rental property. I don't understand Section B, failure to pay a rental permit fee within 1 year after the date of its mailing. So I file for a permit. I assume there's an inspection process. What happens?
I'm not sure I know.
And I don't either, but I will certainly get that information from Director David Riggs.
Because what I'm getting at here is, I'm going to just make an assumption for the sake of the example. I file, they mail me the permit, and I don't pay it. This allows someone to go an entire year without paying the fee. In other words, operating a rental property without the proper permit.
We'll have to find
I'll
out.
get clarity for you.
Yeah. And I would assume that what this is you file the permit the first time you have the inspection, you get approved for a rental permit or you don't.
Right.
And then it's at the renewal time, if you don't pay, then yes, it sounds like potentially it could go a year.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the second part is, it says in part C, said rental permit shall be reinstated upon payment of all past due amounts plus interest. Interest at what rate?
I'll get all that information for you.
And we could make a recommendation for a simple amendment to put it at the prevailing rate or, at the time that it's issued. Okay,
great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to announcements and other business. We will be having a committee meeting next week, so committee chairs, if you have any items that you need to get to the clerk of council, please do so by Wednesday so we can get the agenda out in adequate time for folks. And do council members have any other announcements that they would want to make? Okay. If not, we'll move on to appointments. And we have a series of them tonight, and I do have a slight modification in that it's not on the agenda, but it has been conveyed to council members in writing ahead of time, and this was my error in not putting it through, that we have appointments to our pedestrian accessibility and bicycle task force. And you may remember this was a group that worked for a year and issued a report to council. And then as part of that, they made the recommendation to have a permanent task force created, and a resolution was passed to create the task force, designate the members that would serve on that, and then their appointment process and what they would be doing and their responsibilities. So I believe Councilmember Reisner has those the recommendations for the appointments. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me read this. The Pedestrian Accessibility and Bicycle Task Force, created by Resolution 10-23, calls for the creation of this group as part of the City Transportation Committee, which I happen to be chair of. It shall have a minimum of 5 members to include 2 residents, one that may reside outside the corporation limits but within the county, a representative of the Commission on Disabilities, an OU student, and a member of City Council. The initial members to be appointed: 2 residents, Stephanie Hunter, Rob Delac, Commission for Disability representative, Michelle Hahn, OU student, George Turner, and City Council representative, Micah McCary. So I would like to make a motion that these 5 individuals be appointed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a motion and second for the approval of these 5 persons to the task force. And if I could, we'll have a vote then. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Opposed? Okay, thanks. And welcome. And we'll be meeting soon. So thank you. And I think some of you are here tonight, so I appreciate your taking the time. Thanks. We now have appointments and reappointments to the Affordable Housing Commission, and I believe Councilmember Grace has some updates for us.
Yes, I do. Former council member Michelle Pappy has agreed to serve an additional term on the Affordable Housing Commission, and she was one of the original members of the Affordable Housing Task Force in the city, and therefore her continued willingness to serve is greatly appreciated, as she has a great deal of knowledge and background on the information. And Ms. Polly Sumney of Hocking Valley Bank has agreed to serve for the commission as well, and her knowledge of financing in terms of housing will be very valuable to the commission, and I thank her for her willingness to join. I'd like to make a motion that both of these, this appointment and reappointment, be approved.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and second for the approval of 2 appointees to the Affordable Housing Commission. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right. We now have an appointment to the Shade Tree Commission, and council members have received a copy of the resume for Jean Dubler. And would you like to make a motion?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I would like to move that we accept the mayor's recommendation of Mr. Gene Dubler, who's sitting right over there, onto the Shade Tree Commission as our representative to the Shade Tree Commission. It is something that has been talked about in many meetings that we would really, really love to have an actual arborist on there. And now we're going to, who lives in the city. It's awesome. We're all very passionate about trees, and we know as much as we can, but having an arborist is pretty dang helpful when your whole thing is trees. So, yeah, I'd like to move that we do that.
Second.
A little unorthodox.
We have a motion and second for the appointment of Jean Dubler to the Shade Tree Commission. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, and welcome to the commission. We now have an appointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we have the resume for Mr. Paul Isherwood to serve on the board. And if we could have someone make a motion to approve that. Yes, Councilmember Swank.
I would move that we accept the application and appoint Mr. Paul Isherwood to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We now have a motion to accept our 2023 financial reports, which we have, council members have received, had a chance to review. And if we could have a motion for that.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We now have a motion to accept the September 2023 credit card transactions. Reviewed monthly, because the auditor, the state auditor, requires us to do that. So we do it. It's a good check and balance in the system. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, I didn't get the motion.
So move.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you. Now we have a motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We now have a motion to remove ordinance 9923 from the table. This was looked at earlier, had a series of suggested corrections to the text, and so we had tabled it, and now the next steps would be moving it off the table. And so do we have a motion to remove from the table?
So moved.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and second for removing this from the table. And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, that motion carries. It has been removed from the table. And so now we can consider this for the amendments that were highlighted and, given to council members before the meeting on the fees. As Councilmember Swank pointed out, we have a correction rather than after hours turn off. It's after hours turn on for the water fees. And so that was correcting the off to the on. We also, after some discussion on vending, moved that what had originally been proposed as $100 for a specialty vendor's license, primarily for artists, be reduced from $100 to $25. Rental permit fees were likewise changed, where we had designations of different amounts for different numbers of bedrooms. We have moved to a flat rate of $175 per unit for up to 10 units in one building. And then we have added a $100 rental permit reinstatement fee and increased, I believe, the inspection fee for additional inspections. I think this is at the suggestion of Councilmember Spielness. We've increased that from $50 to $65. Yes, Councilmember Swank.
Just one of the topics here, and that is 11.04.06 vendors. I absolutely positively agree that the $25 monthly fee for art vendors appears to be much, much more appropriate than the $100. However, for other vendors, that's 8 times as much. $200 a month is 8 times as much as 25. And we had a very good discussion last month, or last week, and the mayor did point out that I don't know if the word protect is the right word, but at least need to consider the fact that many of our brick and mortar stores, particularly those who sell food and the like, have significant expenses, including property taxes, that a vendor on the street does not have to pay. That said, the same could be said for vendors who sell art products. We just had a brand new boutique open on West Washington Street, right next to Ben's place, and those people would be competing with that. So I understand the competition aspect of this, and it makes a lot of sense, but I'm just wondering the discrepancy between $25 a month and 8 times that, $200 a month. Is that really, really fair and equitable? I'm certainly not suggesting that all vendors pay $25 a month, but I'm just wondering if that 8 times is maybe a little bit out of line.
Any other comments from other council members? Councilmember Spielness.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think we've been haggling over this for quite a while. I feel as though it is reasonable in that people don't necessarily come to the city for the street vendor food, generally. But people will come for arts, certainly. So I don't have, and the art vendors, as we've heard, make very little money compared to what you can do with the food vendors. So I'm not uncomfortable with that difference.
Okay. All right. And so this has been amended. Do we need any, there's no further action needed tonight? Okay, thank you. All right, thanks for the discussion. As our last item of business, we always have an opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that are not covered on the agenda. Is there anyone that's wishing to speak tonight on a particular topic that's not on the agenda? Okay. If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Seconded.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
7:54 p.m., we're adjourned. Thank you so much.